from the sovereign can be discussed. Also, secondly, Schwartz 8 talks about how like you literally can't convince those people to like abandon that kind of like that liberalism like policy anyways, and so you can't. I mean, there's no transition.
Right. Why is this kind of why is this like epistemological emphasis particular to debate? If all of these things are about community activism.
What do you mean? We would say the opposite, right? The K has no relevance here in this debate if it's about community activism, right? Like, I'm not really sure.
Is this not a community?
Okay, so
are there not black people in this room?
The argument, correct me if I'm wrong. The argument that Moisey makes is that the community space of debate is able to form ways of like self-care and self-responsibility for health that are outside the state and can be applied to external communities, other communities.
I mean, it is a community that could form, strategies to like.
Okay, so for
black women.
Forming strategies for self-care, responsibility.
Yeah, we'll live in the hypothetical implementation of these self-care strategies, like throughout the 1AC.
The Perens evidence.
The whole entire debate.
Actually, not the Perens evidence.
I own 15 evidence.
What does it mean to center black women's ideas?
The what evidence?
No, never mind that. What does it mean to center black women's ideas?
Well, a few examples, right? Like not mooting the entirety of the 1AC, but like not even engaging with black women or whatever, At least maybe talking about the Jennifer Lewis evidence as part, not
okay, so,
yes or whatever. These are different ways to engage with the app.
It seems like a lot of the app's strength relies on like discourse or the idea that there's like a.
I mean, if you want to say like,
what do you think that like talking about things in debate does to solve the app?
I mean, I can say the same thing about your alt.
I'm asking about the app though.
Okay, what we're saying is that this is another community for people to discuss self-care strategies.
Why is debate a good community to discuss self-care strategies?
It is a community for like because black people are in here, right? And we're dealing with like anti-violence in the community. We're dealing with gendered violence, and particularly for black women.
Collins 90 also says that causes like white male like fill into institutions like debate and stuff like that when black women's ideas are put on like back burner and stuff like that, right? So not even engaging with the case is probably another example of those institutional biases against like black women.
The Lester evidence.
Yeah.
The bottom of it indicates that it's criticizing. It requires strategic humanism that recognizes particularities of the male middle class Western human subject. What does this mean?
Sure. So I guess like anti-humanism bad.
Sure.
So this should already go. We're going to figure out something. I think we're going to try to look for a hotspot. But it's not clear.
Yeah, because I figured out when we local record, there's zero issues with their microphones and their cameras. Like, they are perfect quality.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Right?
It's almost better to do that on live stream because you don't even watch a stream. It's all the messages all fucked up and we're just waiting to see the
Yeah, exactly. I figure sound quality is the biggest concern.
Yes.
Even if you can't see it, you still want to hear something. Yeah,
and then like whenever you want to stop it, just hit that, and then it stops. So
yeah, and it'll save it automatically for you, so you don't have to worry about that.
No problem. Then I can come back and fix that. So we need to figure out the hotspot.
Yeah. Do you turn on the round?
Yeah, I got that.
So it's already on?
Yeah, it's going.
Okay, it's good. Is it local or is it too local? It's okay, cool. My round is all kinds of fucked up. Like I'm getting into NC even on because I was on Facebook Live and the Wi-Fi kicked me off and then the XSplit decided to collapse on itself. So that was but I'm pretty sure that's because I got kicked off the Wi-Fi with XSplit was like now I don't know what to do. So but yeah, we'll just go for the rounds and we'll just post them either after the round or tonight.
Yeah. Let's see if I can. To try and figure out how to get a hotspot. We can get one of the moderators
Yeah, let me see. So tab has to be running on my phone internet.
Yeah, shoot, so if you post new one.
Yeah, we're gonna hop on one of theirs.
Yeah.
Does anyone know? I have to go to tab anyways. Where's tab at?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's on the end. Also, I just watched devastating cross-sex in my round. I'm really sad I didn't get it recorded. Because it was pretty good. I'm watching San Francisco State versus, I think, James Madison. But yeah, for poetry, and then the neck that ran the thing with 2Ks. And then during cross-sex, they asked, we should have a conversation. And I was like, there's so much stuff you don't answer. How are we supposed to have a conversation? I was like,
That's funny.
There's no cards. So the order is a K. Alright, then we're ready?
No.
Is everyone good?
Yeah.
It's just okay. Symbiote has created the condition for difference of the difference of the to become a pathologization of the compulsive mental health, defining health as a static place in which subjects should aim to attain now voting negative and access schizoanalytic symptomology that embraces neurodivergence inside as fluid subject formation symptomology as a
insight for creating new methods of understanding mental health, and as opposite of the clinical games. Now, the K outweigh in terms of case for a couple reasons. The first is that their attempt to redefine the relationship to mental health in a way that re-legitimizes the state, only re-entrenches the violent pathologization of people of color they claim to solve for. Now, that's the target evidence. Now, they say that the app creates a condition for which black kids' symptoms of hyperactivity are due to be coded as get coded as hyperactive due to being seen as aggressive. Now, the impact of this is the over-diagnosis of ADHD in the black kids only causes big pharma to expand control over those deemed other by the state. Now, that's the articulation of the target evidence. It's a conceded link argument. The second argument is that this condition of bare life only expands the state legitimacy of control over those deemed the other. Their attempt to change the relation ignores that the people of color, poor and disabled folk don't receive insurance right now, not because of the stigmatization of mental health, but more that the access to health in the first place is the state is given the power to possess over who and who gets health. Now, the third argument is conceded impact compulsory health that late capitalism drives this is needed to preserve and create ableness and the side of productivity. They have conceded that the alternative resolves this because symptomology disrupts the performance of health by opening up spaces where our relation to mental health is different. All of these function as links to the app and this the permutation. That they say permutation, you don't get a permanent method to pay. We win that their relation to diagnosis of mental health recreates their impacts, then the perm can never resolve to their refusal to de-invest in humanist notions of neuroticality. Now, furthermore, there's not clear articulation of the worldly alternative, how the worldly alt interact. They say vague alts and severs perms check. They can't sever the rest from when they see a move to in our office. Now, furthermore, you should feel comfortable voting negative because they're only internally to solvency, succession, and PLC community. Now, symptomology solved because the alternative creates a new method of engaging mental health and can rupture the current psychiatric power of the people. Psychiatric powers people power over people and mental health through creating new subjective relations and alternative narratives about depression, bipolar disorder, etc. The old method goes down the realm of the psychiatric clinical game. Now, this simplest approach is not take your medicine and don't go to the doctor, but rather question your psychologist because they aren't always telling the truth. Now, the alternative key for people of color to redefine the relationship to power structure that pathologize them in context of mental health, i.e. the AFLOS seems like the DSM-5 to control the way that the control and kind of navigate and the way that black people who are bipolar have different experiences than the kind of standard white kind of diagnosis of bipolar disorder. We say that the app only kind of reifies the violence that they claim to solve in the first place. Now, the app also just doesn't solve because they're doing that the conversations have some kind of implication in bettering the mental health of black women, folding them back into a frame of psychic violence at the hands of the state. Now, they can't solve the access portion of the app. This is the access DNA. The access piece is neoliberal insurance power over black people. I expose them to unchecked anti-black violence and the impact of when they see can't resolve means you can vote negative resumption. You should hold their claims us because we win that the pathologization of the mind overcomes this. The body means that the justification the app justifies racist doctor practices. Now onto the line by line. They say there's invisible dissent. No, it's a double bind. First, either the app solves the black people or are exposed to a system that forces pathologization of black flesh to sustain itself, or two, the app doesn't change the relation to mental health. They usually vote negative perception, and then they say medicalization should be good. This is going to be pretty defined because it turns the medicalization is a byproduct of anti-blackness. Is also as a byproduct of anti-blackness is also the time and 10 evidence completely turns this argument because above, as I said above, symptomology is kind of the understanding that health is a scale instead of a static place in which we should aim to be. Now, medicalization leads to like the overcoding of like black bodies being hyperdiagnosed. Medicalization is like the like forced sterilization of black women. All of these medicalization kind of leads to like those instances of violence that they claim to solve. Now the second argument is they say any conversation beginning outside is doomed to fail. No links to this. The links to the Aff because even the evidence, the conceded evidence impact says that liberalism creates a site which political difference, i.e. the way black women talk about their mental health is consumed to give the state legitimacy. They say optimism better than no link. We're not pessimism, optimism. Links optimism only gives the state legitimacy insofar that movements and activism get co-opted and folded back into the semio-captive fold of like activism and like the way we talk about insurance. Now they say that our form of anti-humanism is that we force the abandonment of like liberal subjectivities. No, we don't force the abandonment of liberal subjectivities. It's just a reorganization of the way that the way we talk about static notions of health is analyzed. Now they say that we don't allow for. They say that our movement is bad for black women. Our movement, if anything else, our form of anti-humanism is bad because it allows for fluid subject formation and disruption of other. Yeah, the Carson evidence is actually really good because it talks about the ways that kind of artistic interpretations and redefinings of mental health is especially key for pushing back on like the clinical gaze and psychiatric realm of like mental health, because in the ways that like new imaginaries and new possibilities emerge from sites of like the way we kind of like understand neurodivergence as like a moment in like, I guess like a moment in a site where the imagined possibilities of a world in which mental health is not defined by like the DSM-5 is a world in which like we say that subject formation is net better for black women because the specificity of the way pathologization works is in the context of black people and mental health is so much more dangerous. That so like our form of anti-humanism is better for that reason. On and on. But that's the Carson evidence. They say that care is good, but their reaffirmation of care is successful only. The reaffirmation of care is successful only allows the state control over only bodies they claim to help. Now the Aff is they can see the BZ16 evidence. The Aff only allows for like kind of bolsters like the autonomous liberal subject, which is net bad for black people. Well, it turns the Aff because their first portion of the Aff is talking about like the strong black woman stereotype. We say that the notion of self-care is inherently dangerous to that stereotype because it kind of forces the kind of pathologization of black women back on themselves to deal with. Yeah. There's no answer to the alternative is a better method for understanding mental health. There's also no perspective on like why mental health is specifically key in like now in communities of color.
You ready to cross?
Yeah.
So black people, specifically black women in communities, like mental health just doesn't matter.
No, that's not.
You said there's no pushback on why it's key. So are you saying that it's just
or like why it's key? Why your understanding of discussion is key to solve for that? Is what I meant. Like why discussions appeals.
Okay, so like how does like black women caring for themselves instead of other people forcing pathologization back on them?
Right, because like, well, the first part of this argument is kind of twofold, right? So like your arguments about self-care or like care kind of conceive a notion that one should do one for itself, right? So the
and that's bad because like
the autonomous liberal subject that kind of like. I'm sorry,
so instead of caring for myself, I should
like moral shaming, right? So like the kind of like in the 80s there was a booster. There was like in the 80s there was like.
Why shouldn't black women care for themselves?
The argument is that black women should not care for themselves, but the option, not necessarily the option, but like the rhetoric of care is then used.
Why shouldn't black women care for themselves?
That's not the
argument. The evidence indicates that care functions through pharmaceutical means, pharmacological means, all of biomedicalized by an external authority. We say that that authoritative relationship is what's bad, not care in it itself, but the care, the distinction.
Okay, so like, what's the link between the two? Because like, I'm not getting that. How does the Aff perpetuate that?
Right, so the Aff kind of says that black women should care for themselves by understanding mental health in context of the clinical gaze. We say that that's bad.
Okay. All right. So like, how does the alt solve for like the state control?
What was that?
How does the alt solve for state control?
We're kind of agnostic toward the state. It's not necessarily a question of state control, but more of
how do you not link just as hard then?
Well, because your argument is
align itself with incorporation into the state, like into the state's authority to identify mental illness.
Okay, but you make arguments saying that like, you know, like even if this doesn't happen, like the state will just take control.
Well,
so, like,
our argument is that your reification or like the reinvestment in like static notions of health kind of it assumes you into state control because of the way that the state kind of deems bodies or possesses bodies as being like able-bodied.
All right, so like on your alt, what are these like alternative narratives that you're talking about?
Oh well, the Carson evidence is pretty good about this because it talks away in the way that like new interpretations of like depression, bipolar disorder, other kind of like
and what does those like new things look like? This card is like a year old. Like he doesn't have any. Like do they have any?
I mean, like I think like a really good example is kind of just like not always being like so trustworthy to your psychiatrist, right? So like your psychiatrist could be lying to you about the ways that like mental health or like we think about like your You good?
Yeah. Worst case.
Are there any cards? You said yes or no?
No, no cards.
I'm gonna agnostic for a second. I just need to pee really quickly.
Okay.
Good job. Sorry about it.
These are the two honors English classes they're having for the fall semester. Look at them.
Someone else leave?
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Existentialism, and observatism. And then the next one is eco-poetics. Eco-poetics?
Yeah, that sounds so much.
Sorry, just gets.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
The one he seeks argument is that more black people should seek access to mental health care. The more discursive recognition of mental illness in public spaces, you have to resolve the stigmatization that prevents people from going to the doctor. Ignoring that when people do go to the doctor, they have a biomedical regime of Western knowledge imposed upon them and they're categorized accordingly based upon whether pharmaceutical intervention can turn them into a productive member of late Catholic society. Or Mitchell Snyder just explains the ways in which the preservation of these ideologies, turns the absent past because it reinforces the categorization and categorization and assimilationism that makes black people get pathologized in the first place. The example examples of their clinicalization of difference. First is the YC Jennifer Lewis quote. They say that destigmatization is good because not enough black people go to therapy or get on medication, which even if not their intention, is used to produce a model of what a responsible black healthy subject looks like, so that it can be marketed to and used to brand products and services. For example, the pharmaceutical Bible was targeted specifically at black people under the guise of the farcical concept of biogenetic racial differences, that there's a chemical compound that functions differently because black people are biogenetically different, and hold them to the representations of the YC. They chose the aesthetic format by which their attitude is presented, which means has one sort of way of risk that is incorporated into a commodification economy that relies on these sorts of images in order to relies on these sorts of images in order to justify Western scientific knowledge that it's the reason the app is bad. Two weeks offered active evidence includes that destigmatization entails going to therapy to respond to the psychological effects of black sufferers. That they evidence contains a narrative in the small text in which a woman of color is alienated by a group therapy session and leaves the program against medical advice, which should make you suspicious of what the community models of healthcare the app's advocating actually entail. Argument is not that black people should not perform self-care, but rather that the app is not a performance of self-care because of the biomedical norms that it assumes are true, which make you they never explain how their method functions beyond the level of the discursive, which proves our legal arguments because they trade images of legitimate subjectivity with the expectation of being rewarded with inclusion into the system. They don't solve their impacts. They also align with the power relationship the system that sustains them. The piece of evidence is not answered very well. Arguments that they perform a dichotomy between the cared for and the carer that reinforces psychoanalytic power over psychoanalytic power in the adjudication of mental illness that sustains the pharmaceutical industry. They don't solve. They don't have an explanation of how they're able to resolve this argument because all of the YC's evidence that they claim is talking about self-care is functioning on the assumption that the system should be made that the existing system should be improved so that black people can further engage in it. The Commonwealth evidence is also terribly answered. Debate society symbolic exchange of identity, and they're offering a representational images of suffering in exchange for a ballot. In exchange for the ballot, grounds itself in an idea of a form of ethno belonging that sustains the impact that the evidence is talking about. They say there's no reason that discussions of self-care are bad. This is exactly our argument, which is that engagement in a space of democratic deliberation, which everyone has access to a voice, which is legitimized by the ballot, is a simulation of racial diversity and multiculturalism in a separate echo chamber space of is debate that doesn't have anything to do with the real world. The bait and switch argument, it's a rollback argument, which means that it's terminal defense in the entire YC. It indicates that even if black people were to include themselves in spaces and reformist spaces of biomedical pathology, that these spaces are always denied to them after a certain period of time when the funding is redirected elsewhere because no one wants to fund mental illness, which leads to homelessness and exacerbates problems that are black people are already disproportionately affected by, which means terminal solvency defense to the app. Extend what they say don't force you to go to the doctor argument is that the state directs targeting of individuals towards images of violence by disabled people. For example, whenever a white person commits a mass shooting, there's always a media backlash about whether or not this person was a lone wolf or mentally ill. Whereas when people of color do, it's always driven by religious extremism. This difference is what the app further articulates because the media uses things like the app to propagandize what a legitimate biomedicalized subject looks like, which means that someone who seeks therapy or someone who doesn't seek therapy is less legitimate in the eyes of political subjectivity than someone who does. The overarching ontology of health renders political society inherent. The coherence is the second one. Our argument is not necessarily applied to the individualized level of whether or not one person thinks it's substantively helpful to go to the doctor and get on medication because the alternative does not explicitly reject that. This advanced evidence indicates that the form of symptomatology we propose is a better method of understanding medicalization because it understands that the confluence between individual illness and society, that these three categories are not as distinct as we think they are. They say that we can consider our own things, that there's no need for a doctor to authoritate. Your evidence contradicts this. I think that above they say black women already pathologized. We solved that better. That was the alternative. That was the alternative debate. Also the terms I did on the top of the flow. They say.
They say Jennifer Lewis came to realize that the health industry worked for her in her specific instance. The alternative is not to take issue with that in any way whatsoever. Our argument is not that people should not care for themselves, but rather that the way that the 1AC articulates self-care is grounded in biomedicalized notions of subjectivity. They've uncovered a lot of weak evidence that like the Mitchell and Snyder evidence on the K page that like should make it very easy for you to vote negative on Turner State's warrant. Anything else?
No, you're good.
Okay, we got 7:16. Starting now.
to access the Aff NYU buildings. I just don't know which ones. I mean, I can still walk into the council building. That's only like Cherokee.
Oh, hey.
I feel like I saw the back of your head a little bit before, but I don't know. You're welcome to me.
Yeah, it's good to see you though. Good, yeah.
Are you good at that?
I mean, I didn't know lawyer, so I'm not sure something like that. But I'm trying to, do some cardio, you know.
It's also being for like what's wrong with like single things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I'm not playing it.
I just need something to go on.
Is that it?
But if you take capital,
Yeah, no. Is that it?
Like cap up into reality.
I don't know which version of self-care they're going to put on that.
Oh, yeah. I was coming to get you because we were good, but yeah, I'll talk to you later. Uh-huh.
That what? It's gonna be a case and then critique.
Okay. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
And I'll try to signpost as best as possible. Okay.
It's cool.
Appreciate it. Okay. Everyone all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
First, okay, no regulation why in the case about if you believe these things of the day, because all cases, this case still stands at the top of the head. No evidence talking about national black self-care insurance reform that's easy. I've heard about there. You want to put one down, maybe also more Jones Schwab evidence says that black women are community are culpable but not capable of walking through hell with our panties on fire. That's the least, that's the only level by which makes the key conversation starts about keeping people to help give prevents interrelation of mental illness. We need to care for ourselves when nobody believes in us. Are these evidence points out there? Our insurance company ability to still find medical necessities having severely limited impact on the mental mandating the ACA, and we should take up self-care as a means of not engaging with those institutions, private insurance, working to focus up and vote for us after next. We prefer the performance of black self-care. Our impact is not forwarding our sessions, continue silence in the most vulnerable communities because insurance not us. Jones are they also conceded the core conservative holders and people of color should have the right to keep it real. Talk about against them in the status quo. They should have choice, medicalization, trauma, durable examination, my diagnosis, doctor was by error, all on side advocates. We solve all the problems and what was when a black woman silences that you were negative or should have put on the back burner if we do not take action for an issue that's followed. What do you negative seeks the political and our agencies to write ruling male ideas like leads bring about an impact on this, do this, tailor cost apply this to the critique of black women always having to go through hoops to provide our discussion usually good in institutions like debate. You should ask yourself what this is negative just talking about black women. Him 14 evidence says that the choking of strong black women is systematic inclusion of cause silence and termination that leads to psychological violence. You want me to get?
Yeah. Alright, take it.
And also, wrong fucking out all your proposition, environmental arguments, and only self-care negative conceit that something goes, going to a therapist can be good, and all feelings are based on totalization idea that is not still some way can be given to the case on this instance. Black women are never allowed to care for themselves because someone's always telling them that something doesn't matter. All their case arguments on by the night link, they link just our day, have no meaning of something we're going to say by political control day, offer is discussion to say will still exist in the state can still go after the resistance to the usual prefer self-care. You will we're just giving specifically black women and provide strategies written to deal with the reform of structural violence. Jennifer Lewis says that going the route of medicalization, medication is not mandatory for getting medication, but you should still talk to someone about how you're feeling. And that I own evidence of the police states that self-care is simply listening to what my body tells me, honoring what it needs to be, or is myself as self-care. So that means that you can have different forms of self-care. Literally, you can create your own form of self-care. Go to the critique. Taylor, if you believe all the office none of it's even contextualized to black women mooted by the entire Newport they can't get away with it because they don't believe in coalitions, that they want to explore discussion of racial organization as part of wanting to see evidence. It's basically like debate, that's really anti-black and what's wrong with institutions like debate because our cause evidence says we need to accelerate black women in debate or silence and white male and will fill in like subject normality, which puts our wanting to see aspiration in the back where we solve for the economy. In the case outweighs the turns, the critique outweighs, we're winning both years it's obviously claims about solving strokes and culpability of black women. They don't extend the external impact that we didn't solve for as part of the block. In case always because one population medicalization impacts that they go for in the constant status quo healthcare, not the app. And two, this is not unique. We're already having a unique discussion about medicalization, about capitalization, extend the William 17 evidence from 118 author activists, solve this also turns to they over-focus on trying to resolve formulating new subject information, understand mental illness only falls black women to the backdrop. They will use in the face of visibility that solves the mentality deal. We never take it or trade off with this notion of help and calls solves the argument process of different bodies and forms of meaning and self-care overcomes the Taylor. If you vote negative, you may understand mental health, but gut check what about the alternative makes you understand black women better. Extend the Jones and Ham evidence about tropes and culpability. How many hopes do you have to go through about the proof work that she did? Also, Johnny never read the Kim evidence, our optimism, or those cards. Y'all should flow listen to black women in this debate. This is performance that independents around, and we straight to the critique. They didn't do enough analysis of the less of evidence, which is straight turn strategies built around the views of common humanity, which underpins life in the same ideology that informs plantation order to view of biological determination, contextualize the race with different ontological categories, replicate notions of species determination between whiteness and blackness, especially important when they don't have any answers to our argument about how humanism can be made critical, resisting strategies and subjugation to addressing the way in which white bodies and black bodies are not treated the same way. You should prefer the concrete evidence underpins all forms of this violence, and also they conceded the medicalization sensitivity card that John A. read. That's Parsons solves all our sentimentality debate, only they go for reset and real implications and measures instead of static. Also, you should classify all the Vegas being bad and stuff like that. Vegas justify the perimeter. What is special nominally? What does it do? How does it function? How does it solve the case? How does it solve all the links? How those were all problems not answered by the negative block. How does it solve for black women? So to extend the permutation to it's an intrinsic permutation. Taylor not and nothing about this is a method versus method debate because they don't solve for black women's harms. Instead, you should embrace the negative and the negative in the absence of women's self-care is a parallel permutation. We should not close up boundaries with black people, particularly black women. We have to solve for mental health subject. We can solve for the mental health subject object dichotomy while also empowering black women. Nothing about the permutation answer response to this Taylor. Nothing about the alternatives mutually exclusive. Specifically, the black women. Also, even if they say they do, that probably would justify why excluding black women is uniquely bad because. The interseparate theory is to the app is to the permutation to the app, and then all but extend all non-unique answers I did above an overview about their impact analysis. Nothing about a trade-off, so we can never have so we can still have this debate later and act as there's a time frame argument. We've proven that black women are disproportionately affected, so that means that we have to solve this all when they see having insurance to evidence.
Extend faith.
Yeah, and also extend the thing. Yeah, and also just extend the Schwartz 8 evidence. They have to at least beg the question of what transition means. All right, what's the alternative?
I think that 15
Yeah.
cool speech are you on?
This is about to be the two.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh wait, did the live stream ever work?
So the live stream is not working, but what is working is a recording that will later be uploaded.
Okay.
And so I can probably, did you put me on the chain?
Yeah.
I can just forward you all the
Okay,
link
thank
to
you
it
so
once
much.
it's done.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh no, I just my mom they were gonna be live streaming. She was like, oh what?
Oh,
Yeah, no, parents wanting to watch CEDA is
Yeah.
really cute.
I know. I'm like, girl. She doesn't even understand it, but she's like, oh yeah.
I know, my
He's
dad
speaking.
came to my first CEDA and watched, and it was adorable. My first round, he was like, I think you lost. I had a framework to read. He was like, I think you lost. And I was like, Dad, I really don't think that I did.
Wait, did you win?
Yeah, we did win. He was just confused because he was apparently really persuaded that we were not talking about the topic.
Wow.
Oh my god. Your own dad. Dang, I would feel betrayed. I'm like,
Right.
So my first CEDA round, the other team brought their parents. It's just a bad call. Like, for some reason, you bring your parents to rounds, like, something's gonna happen.
yeah, so I'm like, yes.
And for them, they just ceded the Lincoln Cross-X to the 1AC, and it was just downhill from there, and the judge voted pretty quickly. It felt kind of bad, because the parents had to listen to like a 40-minute RFD on all the things real long. It's not like they couldn't recover from that Cross-X was the biggest issue, but it's just parents
They don't post the price on here. The price of tuition. You need to know how much I'm paying, so I know how much half off is.
Okay.
I got into grad school.
Oh, you did?
Oh, congrats.
Congratulations.
She didn't tell me. I was like, girl, what? And they gave me a scholarship to take half off my tuition.
Oh,
So it's nice.
That's
Congratulations.
fucking great, but also half is not all. So
I know, but it's enough.
Is it? That's great.
Because it's like, my ideal was like, because at NYU, you get into masters, you just get loans. And that's what I was told. You get into masters, it's just loans. So half is better than what I thought.
That's awesome.
So it's gonna be K then case.
Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Capital has created the condition for pathologization of mental health. They have conceded that the way that the act is not an act of self-care, but instead an attempt to fold Black women back into the clinical the clinical gaze. Now the act ruptures this dynamic of the care for by embracing symptomology as an ambivalent approach to the disruption of definitions of health. They've conceded that the medicalization turns to have the act of embracement as medicalization, ignore that the way the pathologization of Black people happens when they get access to healthcare, i.e. the way that black kids are overdiagnosed with ADHD because they are coded as hyperactive and aggressive Black women, or seen as hypersexual, that's forced into sterilization. Now they've conceded the alternative can solve for symptomology health because this messy evidence says that there's a possibility to change the medical field through the artistic interpretation of mental health. This disruption is only possible through the reorientation of Western notions of health and what it means to be healthy. The alternative solves. They conceded the evidence impact refusing to create political strides like self-care that gets folded back into the semiocapital capital frame. Now the evidence is going to be how you should frame the impact debate. They've conceded that the ask gets consumed back into the fold of liberalism. The impact fold back into liberalism. The impacts outweigh the ask, even if the impacts outweigh the ask, even if the alternative can't solve the specific instance of Black women's violence that the ask has highlighted. We mitigate enough of the impact of the K through refusing to be like intelligible subordinate objects, which is like exactly what the ask attempts to be. Now, the permutation does concede, which means that the link debate is partially a nag win because it means that they conceded several dissents to the the Act. The first is the time to evidence black women, the time to evidence black women's mental health is used to control their bodies, isolation of black folks and white clinical gays, overdiagnosis. All these are symptoms of compulsory mental health, in which the health is seen as a static category in which subject should aim to be. The second is the conceded BC16 evidence. They've conceded that their form of care reflects the power of the clinical gaze in relation to black women, i.e. folding them back into autonomous liberal subjects who are open to gratuitous violence in a position where, they are subject topics. Now, onto the line by line, they the one AR offense is completely new, but also they've conceded the double bind at the top of the cake, which means either the asphalt and black people are exposed to a system that forces pathologization, or that the act doesn't solve it, doesn't change the relation to mental health. It means you should vote negative presumption. All their arguments about the we're not in the context of black women don't make sense, because we've already conceded that anti-humanism symbol is just probably better because of the fluid of it's probably not better for black women because of fluid subject formation, because of the possibility for fluid subject formation. The alternative is also aspect. It's also the aspect. That's the Carson's evidence. The second, they say there's also no internal link to culpability, solving culpability of black women. They haven't won any solvency. They haven't won any part of the solvency contention. They have also conceded the double bind, and the evidence impact outweighs culpability of black women because they inevitably allow that to happen. Now, the case. The Commonwealth and Commonwealth evidence is conceded that indicates that the Commonwealth and Commonwealth evidence is conceded indicates the spirits of ethnic belonging are cooperative in terms of brands marketing strategies for violent consumer capitalism. The act has presented itself as an informal commodity to be exchanged for a value. You can consider debating the progressive deliberal space. They're discursive. Solvency claims rely on the idea of people or debate talk about something enough that can create mere material change that can reduce, when in actuality debate circulates our arguments over and over again. They become meaningless. The second conceded the offense of the 2 hours is going to fall back on is the black women. The black women citing this only proves our argument because they see identity categories as something that must be shoved in space of deliberation, exposed to analysis and interrogation. They say the alternative has no way of understanding black women. Our argument is that the purpose of healthcare should not to be claimed to understand black women, because black women can do that perfectly well by themselves. The 2AR will not have some explanation of something you should go beyond. You should center black women, which all of our links and case law arguments respond to. Now the binary example in the 1AR is a real example of how static definitions of healthy use they incorporate black people into institution responsible for violence against them. The drug market specifically for 2 black people that assume the chemical justification for race, further the pharmaceutical industry ability categories difference according to stable notions of Western scientific supremacy. Now, individual movements of self-care can function. The alternative results of broader institution scheme of how healthcare functions better. Now, the media. Oh yeah, they've conceded that in the way that whiteness and blackness kind of have a relationship. Hell is one that when white people commit mass shootings, they're seen as lone wolf or someone who is mentally unstable. Whereas that same instance of violence happens to people of color, where they are kind of seen as terrorists or just subjects of the violent other. We say that pathologization is specifically a reason why redefining orientations for mental health is bad, because it only folds black people back into not being able to be bipolar because they are overcoded in ways that doesn't allow them to be. We say that relationship, it can only be solved through the alternative, because we're the only ones who have some kind of disruption of that status quo understanding of mental health.
We have 2:35.
apparently their opponents said for a first round team, the 1AR wasn't good.
Wow.
And Aaron just sent the slashy sad.
Damn.
Wait, who's the team? These white people with a lot of fun.
Well, first round team, they were very. I too aspire to be that savage.
Just petty and rude.
Yes.
I'm just like, how did you are irreverent, you have no regard, and I support it.
Like, fuck your first round.
Right, you should be like, fuck your first round. If this is CEDA.
Exactly.
Actually, Aaron, they're still gonna beat you, but this is CEDA. Is it case done, Kay?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I have to email my job. Sorry. I forgot to tell them I would not be in today.
Or tomorrow.
The rest of the week.
Oh my
God.
god. Good?
Okay, no, it's fine.
Okay, we're good. Alright. You good, G?
Yeah.
Alright. Okay. Our first piece of college evidence in the Washington State states that black women have different means of resistance against the system, and when we come together and tell our stories that strengthens our resistance. Discussions about mental health are important. When we are not afforded this opportunity to discuss mental illness, then we feel disconnected from the world. This leads to suicide, as our Huffington evidence points out. The negative has not done any articulation of our impacts or even like any extrapolation of how like they can solve our impact. So you're going to give full weight to the Huffington evidence and the first piece of college evidence because like. We just outweigh. And all of their case arguments on the neg, like they're coming off guard, like they link back just as hard. Like they have no means of solving for like state biopolitical control, and like their alternative can also be like commodified by the state because like just because you exist outside the state, because like just like our Aff, like we exist outside the state, but it's like they're saying. But if commodification can happen to an Aff that exists outside the state, then it can also happen to an alternative that exists outside the state. Like, so you should prefer the team that discusses specifically like black women and provide strategies for them, like specific strategies, like not vague ones, and for how they should deal with their forms of structural violence. And all the evidence assumes a totalizing view of how self-care functions. General Lewis says that going the route of medication is not mandatory for getting care, but you should still talk to someone about how you're feeling because like that is good, that is uniquely good because then it shows that you are not alone in your feelings. And our Dion evidence explicitly states that self-care is simply listening to what my body tells me and honoring whatever it needs at that time. Not overexerting myself is self-care. Like there is no medicalization, like in that there is no biopolitical control, that there is no government like telling you or like articulating what your body needs, or like if you just like it's literally just self-care, literally just like if you feel something is wrong with yourself, then you should take time to relax. Black women are never afforded the opportunity to just take time and relax because there's always black men or white women or like other groups like demanding labor from us, like demanding something from us to like do like work. And when we take time for ourselves and say, fuck that, no, we're not doing that, then like we resist that system of labor. Like the neg has not provided an articulation of why that is specifically bad. Like there is no ink on this solvency evidence. You will give this card full weight. We have proven that self-care exists outside of the medical gaze. The negative has not done any work on this card, and like that is going to cost them the round. And onto the K. The two things that are going to win us the K flow is the second piece of Collins 90 evidence that says black women's excellency to be put at the forefront, and the performance this has from the 1AR. They explicitly performed black women's honesty by caring more about what was on their computer as opposed to what I actually said in the 2AC. This is reflected in their alternative solvency as it shows that black women will not have a voice in their new methodology, or her voice will only be selective as they pierce out only the bad things that they hear and make assumptions as they've done throughout this entire debate. Now, our Collins evidence is that when we allow stuff like this to happen, it puts black women on the back burner and allows the continued elevation of elite white male ideas and experiences. And it's also like answers back against their arguments about like epistemic value. Like, yo, whenever black women get up here and like talk about themselves and like say like, yo, we need to be put at the forefront, like there is no value lost, and also like it's also like non-unique, whatever. And also they link just as hard because they're also talking about like identity and suffering. So whatever. And also, you can extend like the non-uniqueness of that was articulated by Josh in the 1AR. And the case outweighed one Taylor. There's not a link to the affirmative, and even if you buy it, if you read nothing about the United of black people taking care of black women taking care of themselves, or as being abstract of the discursive analysis of subject-object dichotomy. And two, all the impacts of mental illness forms are non-unique and non-contextualized to black women or specific to healthcare and not self-care. Control F and 1AC, they don't even talk about race. The 2NR about the all suffering for black women is new. The 2NR dropped the Lester straight turn to anti-humanism and liberal that has been extended throughout the round. Artifacts, humanism can be made critical of existing strategies of subjugation through addressing the way in which white bodies and black bodies are not treated the same way. The refusal underpins life is the same ideology that the forced plantation owners of medical determination. It solves their offense. And you will extend bagels. What the fuck is this disruption? How does it function? Why does it outweigh care? How is a black woman only admit that she has bipolar disorder like Jennifer Lewis? Not a disruption of notions of medicalization. Also, so like you can extend that. And that should be an independent vote and improvement ethics over Apple and everything. Don't listen to Johnny and his run by now flowing and the flowing goes to be shock only. Oh, wait. They can't get their links to sentimentality and sympathology because we don't take a stand so static notice. The whole our evidence says that you do your keep us black women self-diagnosing ourselves and knowing our own problems and treating each other within our community. They've been trying to spin the app as a forced choice when in actuality we're just self-care. And also you can extend the Parsons 13 evidence because what Parsons says is that the idea that like medicalization is like a totally bad or totally good, like essentializes disease and like it doesn't, and it also like takes away agency because like things like black women, like women being able to get abortions is probably a good thing. And gut check, like how do black people apologize ourselves? Fuck the state, fuck the healthcare industry. We already know they're fucks, so your only alternative is to prefer self-care, which can be a form of anything that black folks want it to be. In a sense that the critique does not outweigh, it causes more internalization and pathologization by alluding and not engaging the app. So you can extend like a perm do the app and then off because it and also like so go perm do both because like it solves like all of the links that they go for. We already turned their liberalism links and their medicalization links, so like they have.
So like look to Lester and also like look to their Kermoff, their Kernoff 9 evidence. Nothing about the alternative involves race. Even their assemblage theory and stuff like that absolves or puts race on a back burner, right? Because they said it themselves, race and ethnicity to debate is bad, right? So that means they can never absolve the alternative question of a black woman, right? You should prefer the permutation. It's a parallel permutation. That means it doesn't link to any of their intrinsic offense or whatever. And Bagels already justified like us having a defense of the permutation, right?
And also, you should vote for like a plan that's specific to black women. Like they're always vague, doesn't talk about race. So you're gonna vote Aff.